Jaco Pastorius, released August 1976. Pat Metheny. Another thing about Jaco, I of course, over the last 30 years, have heard hundreds and hundreds of people try and do the Jaco thing, but I've never heard anyone come remotely close to it. On the strength of 2 tracks from Weather Report's superb 1976 album, Black Market, Cannonball and Barbary Coast, I decided I must have this record. Jaco's playing on those Weather Report tracks just blew me away. His touch, his technique, just the pure damn feel of the man. I had no idea what this record was going to sound like. I wasn't into jazz, and a solo record from a jazz bassist, it couldn't be any good, could it? Well, I took a chance, and after 44 years now, it's still one of my favourite records. Every time I hear it, it feels like I'm listening to it for the first time. It takes you on a musical journey, a multifaceted musical journey that is quite simply breathtaking. Jaco joked that back in the day he should have got a gold cassette for this album, as no one bought it, but everyone had a tape of it, and that most of the royalties went to Maxell. Track 1, Donna Lee. Originally a piece written by Charlie Parker, though Miles Davis later said, "I wrote a tune called Donna Lee, which was the first thing I ever wrote." But when the record came out, it was credited to Bird, Charlie Parker, as the composer. It wasn't Bird's fault, though the record company just made a mistake. It's a very fast, complex piece to play on a trumpet, but on a bass guitar? Get out of here. Just with Don Elias accompanying on congas, Jaco manages to capture Parker's phrasing perfectly. To get that horn-like phrasing on a bass guitar, as Pat Metheny said, was astounding. Jaco first started capturing horn lines on his bass when he used to play along to James Brown records in his very early days as a bassist. Track 2, Come On, Come Over. When Bobby Colomby helped Jaco get this deal for the record, he asked Jaco who he wanted to play on the album. One of his choices were the soul singers Sam and Dave. Colomby replied, "But Sam and Dave haven't played together for years. They're not even talking to each other." But somehow he got them to appear on this track. I reckon they must have been sent a demo. They heard the demo and they said, "We ain't missing out on this." And why this wasn't a huge crossover hit for Jaco, I will never know. Jaco had always loved rhythm and blues. Growing up in Florida, he says you were exposed to all sorts of music. Here he absolutely nails a killer of a funk groove. He's backed by one of the best horn sections of all time, which includes Randy and Michael Brecker and David Sanborn. So let's get this straight. Here's this kid of 25 years old who's taking the bass to places no one's ever heard of before, and he's also got the musical talent to be arranging players of the caliber of the Brecker brothers and David Sanborn. That's pretty amazing. Add in Herbie Hancock on multiple keyboards, and everyone, all the musicians involved, sound like they're having an absolute ball in the studio recording this. Track 3, Continuum. It's jazz, Jim, but not as we know it. If you want a perfect example of a masterclass in how to play with feel, this is it. It's Jaco doing his thing, weaving his magic spell as he dances, swirls around Hancock's and Alex DeCurie's light, airy electric pianos. Add in Lenny White's wonderful restrained drumming. Wayne Shorter doesn't appear on this track, but I've always wondered if this was a nod to Wayne, as I can hear Mr. Shorter in Jaco's playing. I've always wondered over the years, was this the track that Joni Mitchell heard and thought, I want that for Hejira? When doing research for this piece, I come across this odd little fact. Fender started mass producing their first electric bass, the Fender Precision, on October 1951. Jaco was born 2 months later on December the 1st, 1951. Karoo, Speak Like a Child. Herbie Hancock, I said to Jaco, you have this amazing gift for harmonies. And you're a bass player. Where did you learn that? He told me he'd listened to all the records I'd ever done, and he'd learned my harmonic style. I was flattered, you know. But he must have told at least 100 other piano players exactly the same thing. On this track, Jaco combines Herbie's piano with a 12-piece string ensemble, Don Elias on congas, and his old friend Larry Economou on drums. The music by turns goes from majestic and powerful to Jaco embarking on these crazy, impossibly fast bass lines. He drags everyone along for the ride, pushing Herbie into producing these stunning piano runs. Portrait of Tracy. Jaco had seen a friend tuning up on guitar with harmonics and decided to explore these on his bass. Jaco, it sounded like music to me, so I just kept going. Portrait of Tracy is just Jaco and those harmonics, and he does paint a portrait. It's a cliche, but to be a great musician, it's not about what you play. It's not always about what you play. It's also about the spaces you leave, the notes you don't play. It's only 2 minutes 22 seconds long, but it's 2 minutes 22 seconds of sheer beauty. Opus Pocus. This opens with steel drums. Before I heard this, I hated steel drums. In the early 70s, just down the road from where I lived, was this geezer, and he called himself Mr. Calypso. Mr. Calypso used to play weddings, birthdays, and probably bar mitzvahs. He would practice for hours. Endless renditions of popular tunes. And Waltzing Matilda. I hated Waltzing Matilda. Opus Pocus has 2 steel drummers on it. 2 old friends of Jaco's from Florida, Othello Molyneux and Leroy Williams. Herbie on keyboards, Wayne Shorter, Don Elias and Lenny White. And like the title suggests, they concoct something magical. At times the track is playful and humorous, others dark and mysterious. And it has a stellar, absolutely stellar performance from Mr. Shorter and of course from Mr. Pastorius. And I have to say, the inclusion of the steel drums was a brilliant idea. It makes the track, and my hatred of steel drums went out the window. On Colle a Trompa. The track is credited to Jaco and Don Elias. They both lay down these complex, mesmerising rhythms. They almost sound like African drums, while Peter Gordon on French horn plays over the top. It's strange, haunting, and very, very beautiful. Next up, Used to Be a Cha-Cha. Growing up, my Uncle Harry was a huge fan of jazz, and I'd sit there and listen to John Coltrane, Eric Dolphy, Charlie Parker, and all of those guys. I could hear that it was great music and played by great musicians, but I just couldn't get into it. Jaco takes the old jazz sound and brings it forward 20 years and turns it into something new and fresh, aided by the formidable percussive duo Lenny White and Don Elias. It's just bass, Hubert Laws on piccolo and flute, and Herbie on piano. Again, Herbie and Jaco seem to be driving each other along, bouncing off of each other with irresistible chemistry. I must have listened to this 1,000 times, and I always find something new in it. And so, sadly, to the last track, Forgotten Love. The other day, my wife came in as I was playing this and asked me, what movie is this from? Sadly, it's part of a soundtrack for a movie that only exists in my mind. It's elegant, sad, and beautiful. It's just Herbie and strings. I don't even think Jaco plays on it. It always reminds me as well that something Gershwin might have written. So there you have it. a multifaceted masterpiece of a record. They say great albums create a world, a space that is uniquely their own. This certainly does, and I believe it was only the tip of the iceberg, only a brief insight into the genius of Jaco Pastorius. When asked about his talents, Jaco once famously replied, "It's all down to harmonics and legitimate vibrato, man." So thanks for listening, and I do urge you to go out and buy this record, or at least listen to it on YouTube, or at the very least go and have a listen to Portrait of Tracy. It's a wonderful, wonderful record, and like I say, it's one of those records I played for 44 years now, and I still find new things on it. It's amazing. So stay well, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video. Oh, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Take care.